Well, good morning. Like you said, my name is Jennifer, and I have the privilege of serving this church for, I don't know what, maybe, are we going on 29 years now? I think I was about 22 or 23 when we started this church and only had two of my four daughters. And we were able to start the church with Judy and Stacy, and we were babies and they were babies, and we all had babies, and it was fun, and it still is. So thank you for this opportunity to speak. It's very humbling. I don't know how many of you have been out to our house, our property. We live out in Yuma Pine on about 4 acres. And when we moved on there, it's been about 13, maybe 14 years that we've been there. And, 4 acres doesn't seem like very much until you have to weed it and mow it. And then all of a sudden, 4 acres is like, whew. But about 3 or 4 years ago, the property that surrounded our property, which is all farmland, it was all sold out to a new company. And when the new company came in, they were like, we're going to make sure that the property lines are where they ought to be and that we're not missing any of our property, because when you get out in the country, fences just, sometimes they're down, sometimes they're up, sometimes they're missing. And it's like, well, where does our property start and where does the next person's property end? And, so that can get kind of convoluted. And then when you're out there for a long time and you're grandfathered in and, you got your neighbors and stuff, it's pretty exciting to just be like, no, we're all out here together, we're having a good time, we're all in the country. But, the newbies came on the town and on the block, and they wanted to make sure their property was right. So they sent a surveyor out, and they surveyed the west side of our property, and it was like, okay, so this fence, you guys have infringed about 8 to 10 feet, you got to pull your fence up and move it back because that's our farmland. And, they had that day where they let us know that. And so then I was a little bit like, Lord, what if, hearing that, it's like they're going to come in and, my property, my territory is going to shrink. Maybe we didn't really have 4 acres, maybe, But the next day they came and they surveyed the south side and we gained half an acre. Because they went, oh, well, it appears that we've been farming your land. And so, you think about, and then it's like, well, how did that happen? How did it happen? We lost our territory to the neighbor, and the neighbor's not a bad person, but how does that happen? Well, it happened because there wasn't a really solid fence, and their tractor came through and swooshed this way and took a few extra inches on that pass, and then the next year when they plowed again, they swooshed again and took a few more inches, and after I don't know how many years, because I don't know how long they've been farming that half acre, but man, it was good. It was good soil. It was fertilized. It was soft. It was ready to plant because corn, peas, on and on it went. That half acre had been farmed for years, obviously. But that half acre was our territory. And so sometimes I think that as people, the enemy begins to take over our territory. And he begins to just very slowly, a few inches at a time, wear away at what belongs to us. And sometimes he does it so quietly and so slowly we don't realize that it's happening. And so one day we wake up and all of a sudden we're just like, wait, who am I? Where am I? Why am I in this survival mode? What has happened? Where is God in all of that's going on? And so that story leads me to about every January I have this little thing that I do with the Lord. And I fast. And I ask God, give me a word. Give me one word, not a word as in like I'm doing right now, but a word, hope, peace, love, whatever. Something you want me to work on this year. And so during that fasting time, God usually does. Sometimes it's like hope, or sometimes it's like, I want you to work on forgiveness or something. And so then I just pour myself into that because I just want to constantly be like, God, use me. God, make me, reform me, rebuild me. But this year, something different happened to me. As I was seeking God's face and I was praying, this word audacious came in. And I thought it was kind of funny. I'm like, audacious. And, that's kind of like a scary word, to be honest. Now, if you're someone like me and you're slightly timid, you've always been timid your entire life. You were the kid that hid behind your mom's skirts and that didn't make eye contact with people and that hoped beyond hope that the day would run out and there wouldn't be time in class for your turn to get up and give the presentation in English class. If you were that kind of person and still are, that's the kind of person that I was. And so when God just landed this audacious on me, I was just like, audacious. So I immediately grabbed my phone, I looked it up, and this is the definition that popped up: showing a willingness to take surprisingly bold risks. I read that part and my stomach got hard, because I'm like, okay, if God's really speaking to me and this is what he wants to work in me this year, he wants me to begin to have a willingness to take surprisingly, not just risks, but bold risks. But then I read the next line, I thought, oh, a series of audacious takeovers. And I just went, oh, okay. And I tossed my phone to the side and I'm just like, yeah, like Stalin or Hitler. I'm like, God's not speaking that to me. God's not speaking that to me. God's not wanting me to become Stalin. I mean, that's not a godly thing. These audacious takeovers, another definition said violent takeovers. And so I tossed my phone aside and I just kind of went about my day. And a few days later, God brings it back, audacious. I'm like, Lord, I don't want to be audacious. And besides, violent and audacious takeovers are not of you. And so I don't think this wrestling was going on. And so then I'm just like, well, maybe I missed it. Maybe there's a second definition. And so I pulled it back up and I just Google, you Google everything. Definition of audacious: showing a willingness to take surprisingly bold risks. A series of audacious takeovers. So then I had a really serious conversation with God. I said, God, I know that you are not calling me or calling your church or calling any of your people to go on a rampage of a series of violent takeovers. And he said, oh, but I am. Because what if what you're taking over is the enemy and what you're getting back is the ground he stole from you? And I was just like, whew. And I was just like, and then to be honest, my first response to that was just like, my gut hurt. I'm like, you asked the wrong girl. You asked the wrong girl. It's like, you know me, Lord, you know me, and you would never call me to do something that's outside of my character. Yes, I would. Think about the Bible. My mind began to go back to different stories in the Bible, and I'm going to read some of those to you. Today. And first is the story of Joshua in Joshua chapter 6. And the biggest part about this story, and I'm going to kind of take for granted that you may know this story for yourselves, but I will tell a little bit of it. And that is that the Israelites had been in slavery in Egypt for years, and they came across the desert. God wanted to give them back their territory. He's like, I'm sending you home. You didn't go home in time, and because you didn't go home in time, the enemy took over the territory that I gave your father Abraham. But I'm sending you back, and I'm sending you back with the strength and the power to take it back. And so he sends them across the desert. And then they get up to the line and they freak out like I was doing in that moment. And they freak out and they run back. And so then God just says, okay, those of you who have little faith, you can wander around the desert until you die, because I'm going to take the next generation and do what I intended to do with you. And he does. And so what we come to then is we've got Joshua, who's of the next generation, because Joshua was one of the only few that went into the promised land that said, we can do this with God on our side. And so God sustained Joshua's life, and he brought him back around. And so now we're there again, and we're right at the edge of the promised land. And God is saying, Joshua, go in and take it. And so God gives Joshua a strategic mark, and that is Jericho. Go in, take over Jericho. It's the stronghold of the Midian army. I'm sending you in to do that. So the story goes on in Joshua. Joshua and Gideon are who we're going to talk about today, and they're two very different men. Joshua was the kind of man that was like, whoa, yes, give me the opportunity. Let me go fight these people. He was geared to be a warrior. From the very beginning, when he first went over as a young man and he saw everything that God wanted to give to him, he was that one that was just like, yes, and wanted to go in and take it over with an attitude of power. And I know that sitting in this room, there's a lot of people who you are naturally geared, and God has given you the gifts and the abilities and just the natural inclination to want to take hold of things. But then there's the other half of us who want to run and hide in a cave like Gideon. All right, so we're back to Joshua now, and we're right on the edge, and he's supposed to go into the promised land, and he goes, okay, so then there's this whole process where, they take the Ark of the Covenant into the middle of the Jordan, and God appears and the water parts again, and all of Israel goes across into the promise. All of Israel, men, women, and children go across. And then once they get over there, they circumcise all the men, and they renew the covenant with God, and they're in the promised land. And then God sends them, Joshua, he's like, okay, go out and go take a look at the ground where I'm going to give you victory. So Joshua goes out, and he's like, okay, I'm going to go spy. I'm going to climb a tree. I don't know what his intent was, but he's going to go spy out Jericho. What kind of stronghold do they have? What does it look like? What am I up against? Now remember, this was Joshua's land inherently. This is the land God had given the Israelites. So that even though Joshua had been there once before in his youth, and now he was going back. Okay, so he'd seen this space before, but he knew he went with the authority of God. So he goes back there, and he's alone, and he approaches Jericho, and a man appears to him. And so he has this conversation with this guy. And this man, and he's just like, who are you? And he's obviously a warrior. And he goes, who are you and whose side are you on? And he said, I'm the commander of the armies of God, and I'm on no one's side but the Lord's. And so then, of course, Joshua he takes his shoes off. He falls on the ground. He's like, God is, okay, what do you want from me? And so then that angel gives to Joshua a strategic plan to overthrow and take back what the enemy had stole from him. So here's the plan that he has for him. He tells him, take all of the warriors, put the armed warriors in front, take 7 men with 7 trumpets, the priests, take the Ark of the Covenant which represents God, line everybody up like this, and then put the rest of the army behind you. 40,000 warriors. Now, I did a little bit of homework in Jericho. To be honest, it's not that big a place, but it was a stronghold, and I don't have time, and it doesn't matter. You should look it up. But one man, if he could walk next to the wall, which he couldn't, because there were houses outside of the walls of Jericho, farmland and stuff, so there's a good chance they were half a mile out, but within sight of the wall, as they're walking around it. It would take about 15 minutes to walk around it, because the whole of the tightness of Jericho was about 10 acres, where the stronghold was built. Then there was a bunch more acreage and another big wall around that then more people lived in, maybe the slums of the city or the farmers or the more poor. And so anyway, so you're talking maybe 4,000 or 5,000 people in here. But what made them strong was the wall, right? I don't care if you got 40,000 men. The reality is, if you can't climb over a 35-foot wall that's 12 feet thick at the bottom and 6 feet thick at the top, no one's getting through that. So Jericho, as scared as they were like, no one's getting through this, and we've got enough storehouses in here. We can sit in here for years until they get tired and move on. So that's what's going on between Jericho, the enemy of God, and Joshua, who's been sent to come and get back what belonged to him. And so this is what the angel says. He goes, I want those 40,000 men. How long would it take 40,000 men to walk around Jericho? That would take a long time. The first guy goes and gets done in, maybe an hour. But 40,000 men walking around, so this was a long procession all day long, and they were to do nothing. They were to say nothing. The only thing they did was blow trumpets. They made a racket. The war, they blew a trumpet, and that obviously that probably made the people inside be a little bit like, ugh. Then the angel told him, go around one time, every day for 6 days, but on the 7th day, something different is going to happen. On the 7th day, you're going to engage. On the 7th day, no matter what you think about what's going to happen, no matter how much doubt you have, no matter how much worry you have about who you are and what your ability is, you are going to engage through obedience with God, and then God is going to do something to blow your mind. And so they did. They went out, and they walked around, and they walked around, and they walked around 7 times, and on the 7th time, they had been commanded by God to shout. And I just got to wonder, what was that like? I mean, we tell these stories at church, and they're exciting to us. I'm like, oh yeah, and they did. They shouted. The horns blew. The people shouted. The warriors shouted, and the walls dropped into the ground. And the Bible says that they walked through, just walked right up through, and took over. Okay. The miracle of God happened. Obedience started first, and the only thing they had to do was shout. You're thinking, okay, well, no big deal. Okay, that's fine. But how many of you, don't raise your hands, how many of you in this place, if I said on the count of 3, we're going to shout, how many of you would actually do it? That was me. When God's sitting here being like, audacious, hostile takeover, a willingness to take surprisingly bold risks. Because see, there's something that gets in the way sometimes between us and what God wants to do, and that's our pride. We sit there on our hands. And if I said, okay, everybody just shout as loud as you can, it'd probably take me a while, because some of us would, because we're that personality. We're like, 10 of us, yeah! And the rest of us are like, well, we're going to just wait and see what everybody else does. I'm just being real with you right now. I'm saying I would be one of those that just kind of was like, yay. But the reality is God said, shout. And maybe it was a trickle effect. Maybe there were some that were like, yeah, and others that were like, yeah. And then when those walls start coming down, yeah, right? But how sad for those who had to wait before they waited to see, is it God really going to do what he said he would do? I'll just wait and let these other people carry it. Let these other bold ones carry it. And when God begins to move the way that he said he would move, then I'll join the foray and get, woohoo, then I'll be, all right? Well, I think sometimes in our timidity, we can be that way. What did it sound like to be there in the presence of 40,000 men shouting, letting loose of every kind of anything that was holding them back? Every fear, every bit of pride, every bit of, my wife is sick at home, or I wonder how long those who came across from the eastern side, I wonder how long it'll be before I get back home to my kids, or whatever was going through their mind. But 40,000 men shouting. There's God-like shouting. And there's another story that I'm going to get to here that's about shouting. And that is the story of Gideon. Now, Gideon's a whole different story than Joshua. Because Gideon, the enemy not only has taken over, but they were there. This is like after Joshua and after the Israelites go into Israel, and then Gideon's there, and the Israelites are there for a season, but they begin to worship other Baals and sacrifice their kids and do all kinds of wicked and horrible things. And so the enemy begins to come in and take over again their territory. And this time it wasn't because they were asleep in Egypt and it quietly happened. This time it happened because they invited the enemy into their territory. They opened the doors wide up. Bring your Baals in, bring your gods in, bring your prostitutes in, bring it all in, and let's just all celebrate together. But now all of a sudden, the people who they had brought in were oppressing them to such a degree that they were hiding in caves in the mountains. They weren't even at home. They weren't in their towns. They were hiding from the people who had taken over their territory. And so, this is found in Judges chapter 6, verses 11 through 16. And I want to read that for us here for just a second. The story of Gideon. The angel of the Lord came and sat down under the oak of Ophrah, that belonged to Joash the Abiezrite, where his son Gideon was threshing wheat in a winepress to keep it from the Midianites. And when the angel of the Lord appeared to Gideon, he said, "The Lord is with you, mighty warrior." "But sir," Gideon replied, "if the Lord is with us, why has all this happened to us? Where are all his wonders that our fathers told us about when they said, 'Did not the Lord bring us up out of Egypt?' But now the Lord has abandoned us and has put us into the hands of Midian." The Lord turned to him and said, "Go in the strength you have and save Israel out of Midian's hands. Am I not sending you?" "But Lord," Gideon said, "how can I save Israel? My clan is the weakest in Manasseh, and I am the least of my family." And the Lord answered, "I will be with you, and you will strike down all the Midianites together." And then the story goes on that Gideon, the first thing that God asked Gideon to do is to clean house. He goes, go to your father's place, which is probably where he lived, and he goes, tear down the Asherah poles, knock down the idols, those things that have come in, that you invited in to my territory. Strip them down, cut them up, knock them down, and build for me an altar and sacrifice on it one of your dad's cows and bring my glory back to the territory that was stolen. And so Gideon, again, see, I identify with Gideon. He is scared. And he's just like, okay. He's like, I'm doing that at night after my dad goes to bed. And so he does. He goes at night, and I don't know if he has help or not, but he cuts down the Asherah poles, and he knocks down all of these idols that his dad and the nation has set up, and he burns the Asherah pole, uses it as kindling under the fires of the sacrifice unto God, and he reestablishes God on the throne of the place where he lives, right? His home where he lives. And the next morning, the community is in uproar. Who tore down the Asherah poles? Who tore down the idols? What's going to happen? And what about our Baal? And they figure out that it was Gideon that did it. Again, put yourself in Gideon's place. Let's turn it into like a practical thing. What if God came to you and he was just like, I want you to go down to City Hall and I want you to tear down the flagpole. I'm not against flags. I'm just trying to think of something that's erected, so don't get a misunderstanding analogy. What if it was just like, I want you to go down, I want you to tear that down, and then I want you to put up a cross in its place. Would you do it? Really, would you do it? That's what God's asking Gideon to do. And if you're kind of like me inside, you're like, I ain't going down to City Hall and doing that. What if I get arrested? And maybe I won't get arrested, but the least it would be is that I get up in the newspaper and there'd be a picture and it'd be like, look at this person. She tore down the City Hall sign and she put up a cross in the place. People would laugh at me. And when I went into stores, it'd be like, oh, look at that's that girl. Yeah, that's that one that did that thing. We'd be thinking, and then what would my mom say? What would my dad say? What would my husband say? Well, my goodness, no, God must not be calling me. That's weird. That's aggressive. Oh, no, actually, that is a hostile takeover. That is the willingness to show surprisingly bold risks if God asks you to. So here's Gideon. First he does that, and so the whole community comes to his dad's house, and they're just like, they're livid, and they're like, who did this? And this is interesting. Gideon's dad comes out, and he defends him. It was his own house. It was Gideon's dad had allowed the enemy to come in. Hey, you've got the tallest hill in town. We want to put this Asherah pole up there so we can all see it from a distance. Well, I don't think that's what we should do. I don't think that that's right. I don't think God would appreciate that. But, I don't want to offend the city council. So, okay, go ahead. But when Gideon has the guts to take it down, even though he did it in the night, and those people, that emboldened his dad. And his dad's just like, you think that Baal's upset about it? Let Baal deal with Gideon. And they're like, if you think that Baal is a real God, his dad said, you let Baal defend Baal. And so then everybody's like, yeah, we'll let Baal strike down Gideon. And we know that Baal is nothing but a stone and a piece of wood. And so there was no assault against Gideon. So then Gideon goes on and God tells him, okay, you got to fight against these Midianites. And so he rallies up like 22,000 men. And then God tells him, that's too many people. Tell anybody who's too afraid to go home. If they're trembling in their boots, facing the Midianites, tell them to go home. So he does, and he's down to 10,000 people. How would you like to fight a battle with that? How would you like to just be like, okay, we're going to do this thing, everybody, and then have God, and really, everybody showed up, everybody came out. I've got a big war, a big army behind me, and then have God tell you, okay, that's too many, send half of them home. Okay, 10,000, that's okay, but that's not enough. I don't know. Okay, Lord, that's fine. Okay, good. Okay. And so Gideon just starts laying down fleeces. And I'm identifying with Gideon. So God, is this really what you're telling me to do? I mean, I sent them home. I felt like that was right. Now I woke up. I can't sleep at night. I'm having panic attacks, anxiety, going every which way because, Lord, are you really asking me to do this thing? I mean, 10,000 people, I don't think, okay, if this is really you asking me, I'm putting down a fleece, make the fleece wet, make the ground dry, make the fleece dry, make the ground wet. I mean, multiple times. And God just keeps assuring him and assuring him. And so then they go on to fight a battle. They go on to fight a battle, and God gives them the victory, not with 10,000 men, but with 300. Because God says that 10,000 is too many. I don't want anyone to say they did it in their own strength. We went in with 10,000 warriors, and we wiped out the Midianites. We wiped out the enemy. Send more home. He gets 300 men. And then God gives him a strategic plan. Go up on the mountains with jars and fire. And when you hear the call, smash, smash, smash those jars. Hold up that fire and blow 300 trumpets. They had surrounded the Midianite camp on the hillside. They pounded, they let the fire loose, they held up their torches, and they shouted. They blew horns. And then he says to them, and when you get up there, I want you to shout out in the name of, let me find it. I don't want to misquote what he says. In the name of Gideon, basically, in the name of God and in the name of Gideon, we're going to take these people out. And so they run to the roar again. 300 people. God caused such the sound of the trumpets blowing sent mass confusion into the camp. They started killing each other. God, they didn't even have to fight the battle. Now they kept pressing through and going through. They chased them all the way out until they had conquered them completely. They did their part. But the majority of what had happened, they already took place. And there's a passage in here where God comes to Gideon and said, look, Gideon, if you're afraid, and I know that feeling. Jennifer, if you're afraid. Gideon, if you're afraid, before it's nighttime, okay, it's nighttime, and God's saying, okay, tonight's the night. I'm going to have you do this thing tonight. And it's like, okay, Gideon, if you're afraid, take a couple of your spies and go down into the camp and listen. And so he does. He takes off and he goes down into the camp and he listens. And the enemy in the camp was already saying, have you heard about Gideon? Have you heard that God is with Gideon? I had a dream. One of them says, I had a dream and this giant, and this would be a whole sermon of its own, but this giant loaf of bread rolled down the hill and took out our camp. Gideon's coming and his God is coming. And by the way, the bread is the bread of life, which is Jesus Christ. That's a different sermon. But this guy, the enemy knew that God had the victory before Gideon knew. So how many of us in this house need victory in our life? How many of this in this house have found ourselves in that place where it feels like the enemy has come in and taken over territory and God is being like, you got to stand up and do something about it, and yet we're terrified and we don't know what to do and we don't know what to say, and we pray about it and then we're just like, yeah, I don't know about that. And it's like, did you know that the enemy of God already knows God wins? You're fighting a defeated enemy. And if he's come in and he's taken up camp in your territory, it's because we haven't done anything to stop it or to push him back. So Gideon does. He does it. He pushes them back. They chase them down. The rest of all those warriors, not the 300, but the 10,000 or whatever, get behind him, and they completely remove the enemy. I think that God has a challenge for us this morning. I know that he does. Because back in January, when God put this on my heart about audacious, I was just like, God, I don't know how to be audacious. That's not my nature. And then God said, yeah, but I haven't given you a spirit of fear or timidity, but of power and of love and of a sound mind. It is your nature because it's God's nature. It's my nature that you would be bold, that you would live for me, that you would press in, that you would not allow the enemy to take over your territory, and that your territory and your boundaries and your properties would be so secure that you would have the leftover ability to go and fight a war for someone else as well and help them push the enemy out of their life. God has a job for us to do, and we don't want to stay silent. We don't want to sit and do nothing. So what do these stories of Joshua and Gideon have in common? Both had allowed the enemy into their territory. Both were called by God to do something about it. Both were promised that God would go with them. And both blew the horn and shouted. So I'm going to wrap up my talk today, on this concept of blowing the horn. It's something that I believe is specific to me as I walk through this and to us as a church body. I'm challenging us this morning to run to the roar, to gird ourselves for the battle that we have been called to. I'm challenging us to wake up and grab our swords and fight. What do you need to fight for? What has the enemy stolen from you? And this is where me personally, while this message was rolling on my mind since January, when Pastor Owen came and said, I think I'm going to have you do Women's or Mother's Day, I was just like, oh, okay. I said okay right away, even though it made me shake in my shoes. I'm not a bold person. But what made me shake in my shoes was because I knew the message I had to bring to us about this audaciousness, about living in boldness for God and not allowing him to come in and destroy what belongs to us. Is Satan in destroying your marriage? Are we full of bitterness? What does that look like? Unforgiveness. Is he coming in and robbing you of your children? Is he robbing you of your joy? Is sorrow so great in your life that you've lost the joy of your salvation? I'm not here to rain on our parade, but I'm here to wake us up. I feel like God is saying, wake up, look around. Just because we have someone in office who's conservative doesn't affect my heart and my home. We are making ground as a nation in certain areas, but let us not roll over and fall asleep in the midst of it, because while the enemy is running away, Gideon called all the rest of the warriors, and they kept pressing the battle until they'd won completely. And we've got to win in our own hearts and our own minds and our own lives, and we've got to win in our communities. We've got to win. Maybe you've been sick for a long time. And you're just tired, and you just don't want to do it anymore, whatever it is. I'm here to tell you, don't give the enemy any more ground. And I know how you might be feeling. If you're like me, you're feeling the way Gideon felt when God showed up and said, hey, Gideon, thy great and mighty warrior. Gideon's looking at, you know what Gideon did? He said, yeah? Well, where was God? Why am I even in this mess? He accused God. He just was like, the fathers told us that these great things would happen here. All these things that God used to do, but look at us. We're slaves to the Midianites. Where is God? Has he abandoned me? You know something really interesting that I noticed when I was studying for this? When the angel of the Lord responds to that accusation, when he responds to Gideon, he never addresses the accusation. He never defends himself. Do you know why? Because God was not to blame. God is not to blame. God didn't even go toe-to-toe with, well, it's because the only reason because here's the truth is that they were in the condition they were in because they had let the enemy in. Period. In that situation. In the situation with Joshua, they were in the condition they were in because they had allowed the circumstances of their lives being in Egypt had allowed the enemy in. But no matter how we get to where we are, if we are in that place where we feel like the enemy has taken ground in some area in our lives, stolen our joy, stolen our peace, causing relational issues in our lives, that's personal, that's in our lives. And then what about the world around us? What about what God has called you to do? This church is a wealthy church full of prophets and preachers and teachers and healers and people of God. Where are we? Stand up, rise up. So you might be thinking, as I was, how, Lord? Because, you kind of think, okay, got to be like Joshua. I'm going to go to City Hall and walk around it 6 times every single day, and then it'll come, well, why would I want to do that? No, okay. We kind of try to figure out, well, how is it that we're going to do something really audacious and freaky and whatever, just for the sake of the Lord, and I don't think that's what God's calling us to do. No, not at all. Sometimes it's just that God's calling us to tell the truth, to be honest with people, to stand up for God, to stand up for what he's doing, to love people. And it starts in our own homes and with our own families. These are audacious things. These are God's audacious things. Some of us in this room are called to ministry. You're called to teach or to preach or to minister somehow. And we've sat too long, and it's left a hole in the church. So I asked God, okay, what are we supposed to do about it? God, if you don't understand, like for me to stand up here, I'm like Gideon. God's saying, go and do it with the strength you have. Gideon, he said that to Gideon, go and do it with the strength you have. It's like, God, how am I supposed to get up and challenge everybody? What do you want us to do, Lord? What do you want us to do? We're trying our best, What do you want us to do? And just honestly and clearly, I just felt like God said, I want you to shout. I'm like, okay, so I'm just going to get done with my little talk and then make everybody stand up and shout really loud. He goes, oh yeah, kind of, and not like that. See, some of you are getting nervous. You're like, it's about time for me to go out and get coffee. She's going to make us do something weird and uncomfortable, and it's going to make my flesh, it's going to humiliate my flesh, and so I think I'm going to get out of here. Hey, look, I've already humiliated my flesh by standing up here. Do it scared. Whatever God's calling you to do it scared. That's what Gideon did. He said, you go in the strength that God said, you go in the strength that you have. Do what I asked you to do. And when you blow those horns, when you shout, then you will see your efforts and my efforts converge and become something that you had no idea you were capable of in me. So then I'm like, okay, God, but no, really, what do you want us to do? And I got the most beautiful picture from the Lord. He goes, I want you to tell my people to worship and praise me with abandon. That's the shout that God has given to you and I. We may not have Jericho to overcome. We may not have the Midianites to press back. We have the same things, though, in our own hearts and lives. And he's just like, you know what? I want you to tell them to set their selves aside. And when Stacy gets up on that stage, and when that music plays, when the trumpet, I want them to not worry about what someone next to them is going to think. I don't want them to be thinking about how long is this taken. I want my people to learn and to press in through praise and worship. And when they do that and it becomes what they do and what they know and what they express, aside from their own selfish thoughts, they're going to begin to hear from me. And they're going to, because of the worship and the praise, they're going to have the courage to take action on what I'm telling them. And I'm like, are you serious? Are you telling me that if we get up and we sing with reckless abandon, that something big is going to happen in my heart, in their heart? Guys, yeah, it's how I've always done it. It's how I've always done it. That's our part. And so my message for you this morning, even though we talked about battles and ground that the enemy is taking and all of that, the strategic part right now for us today is to get up, to wake up, and to respond to praise and worship in a way that we never have before. And if your flesh is sitting there being like, well, I don't know how to sing, and oh boy, I don't know, I'm getting out of here. You know what? I'm telling you, then you're the one that needs to stay and do this. Because we have to discipline our flesh. We have to tell our flesh to take a side seat and let God do something bigger than what our stingy flesh will allow. So stand with me this morning.